vision, or if you're to take it the next step, to be a visionary. And my whole life I've been fascinated with people that we would call visionaries. One of my heroes in college was a guy named Richard Branson. He dropped out of high school, and that's not why he was my favorite, but he dropped out of high school and he started this magazine because he loved music. He lived in England. And then from that, he started a record label. And from that, he started all kinds of things. Eventually, he started Virgin Airlines. And now he has Virgin Galactic. And if you have like $7 billion, he'll fly you to space. And he has an ownership stake in over 400 different businesses, but he's this really charismatic, always smiling, cheerful guy. He even owns his own island. And he's this person that everybody wants to follow, and they'll literally give a percentage of their business to him just so that they can be a part of his vision and who he is as a leader. On the flip side, there's a guy like Steve Jobs, who when he started Apple Music was really hard to get along with, and people would say he was mean, but he could see things way ahead of people. He understood the home computer. In 1992, I bought a Mac Classic and have had an Apple product ever since, so I've I guess drank the Kool-Aid. But he was able to see that not only will a home computer, because when he started that, people were like, there's no need for this. And he was saying, no, in 10, 15, 20 years, there's not going to be one of these in every house or so. There's going to be 5 of these in every single house. And then when the phone started, the mobile phone, the flip phone, and even the brick phone before that, he started thinking about this thing and realizing that it's not just a phone, it's a device to control all of humanity 24 hours a day. I'm going to know where you are every minute, every second. I'm going to know what you're thinking about, what you're looking at. It's not just a phone. In fact, we hardly even use this for a phone, because if you call somebody, your reaction is, why are they calling me? I called somebody the other day because he says, he's constantly saying, I don't answer ever. I'll never answer. And so I called literally 4 or 5 people. Every single one of them sent me straight to voicemail. So I called him. Well, it's Marshall. He plays bass every now and then. And at Marshall, instantly, what do you need? I'm like, Marshall, you said you never answer the phone. He goes, yeah, but you're calling. And if you're calling, I'm answering the phone. I'm like, he goes, what do you want? I'm like, I just want to see if my phone worked. That's it. He's like, oh, cool. You see, visionaries can see what other people can't see. And then they have the potential to rally people behind them, because those people begin to see the vision of what this person has. Oftentimes, visionaries don't have any idea how to even accomplish their vision, but they know to bring people along with them that can. You see, visionaries have this massive view of the world and our lives and who we are and how we think. And yet, there are visionaries that are in the smallest, tiniest of moments. You see, when you speak to somebody, you're casting vision into their life. You're telling them who they will become. You're giving them value. There's this positive and negative effect that actually comes from that. There's a pastor named Andy Stanley. He's written a ton of books. He wrote a book called Visioneering, and in one of the stories he tells in there, he said when he was in 8th grade, he was trying out for the basketball team. He'd made it through the first 4 cuts, and on the last day, he's standing at the baseline. The coach is standing near him. They pass him the ball. He grabs the ball, and he shoots it, and it's a complete air ball. He said he looked over, and the coach was just staring at him. He said with this look of disgust, and he just simply said, the coach said, Stanley, you're spineless, and walked away. Andy Stanley got cut, and he said that he never tried out for another team in his life because of the words that coach said to him. He said it was well into his late 20s where he could even begin to have confidence in who he was as a leader because the vision that person cast into his life. You see, being a leader with vision can change things. It can change people. It can draw you closer to what you're meant to be, and it can completely leave you in the gutter for years. They did a survey, and I asked this group of people, they would say yes or no. Are you a leader? 1 in every 10 people said yes. Then they asked that same group of people, they said, are you a visionary? And then it dropped to 1 in every 1,000 people said, yes, I'm a visionary. Here's what I believe. I believe that everyone in this room, regardless of age, regardless of background, regardless of IQ, everyone has the potential to not only be a leader with vision, but to be a visionary. And it's so important to humanity and to God that you believe that, but not only believe that, but that you step into it. And you begin to live your life in such a way where you understand that, no, I'm not only going to be a leader with vision, but I'm going to be a visionary. Simple question. You can answer this in your mind. Are you a parent? Are you a friend? Are you a boss? Are you an employee? Are you a grandparent? Are you a spouse, a sister, a brother? Do you have a pulse? If you answered yes to any of those, I'm sorry, but I believe with everything that you have what it takes to be a visionary. My grandson, Monroe, probably 10 times a day I'll look at him and I'll say, Monroe. And I'll wait till he looks at me, Monroe. And he'll look at me. I'll say, you are a good boy. And he'll look at me, he goes, yes. I said, Monroe, I am proud of you. Yes. Monroe. And he'll look at me. And it's one of these where he'll look, yes. And he goes back. Then, Monroe, look at me again. And he looks. I'll say, Monroe, I love you. And he look at me and he says, yes. Every now and then, 1 in 10, he says, I love you too. Yesterday, he was eating yogurt at the table, watching Paw Patrol. And all of a sudden, he looks at me, he goes, Pops. And I look at him, he goes, you are my best pal. I said, that's right, buddy, I am. You see, I want to speak the vision of truth into his life. He has a bit of a stutter and a bit of a speech impediment. And at some point, he is going to leave the safety of my house and enter the world of humans. And some kid is going to say something to him, and I'm not allowed to punch that kid. But I want him to know when that kid says something, or when that person teases him, or when he feels left out, or when he is struggling, I want him to know that he is beautiful and perfect, and that I'm proud of him, and that I love him unconditionally. See, I'm speaking vision into his life. And that's the same thing that God is doing to us. It's the difference between stepping into the vision he has for our life and kind of walking around it. You see, because in our world, specifically here in America and the Western world, we're okay with okay. Because what happens with okay is if you think about it, how's your family doing? Well, we haven't had a kid run away for 3 weeks, so yeah, we're good. How's your job doing? It's fine. Like I don't really like it, but I get paid, so it's good. How's your relationships going? Yeah, they're good. I talked to 4 people this week, so that's pretty good. I go to church like 2 to 3 times a month, and in today's day and age, phenomenal, record breaker, like unbelievable. I'm okay. But when you look at faith, when you look at who we're designed to be as humans in this relationship with this Creator and what Jesus has in store for us, I can't think of one moment when okay is just okay. There's a passage in Revelation chapter 3. See, there's 7 letters written to 7 churches in 7 actual cities in modern day Turkey. And so this is written to the angel of the church in Laodicea, right? These are the words of the amen. Now the amen was the ancient term for who God was. So this letter is to this church of these people in this city in Laodicea, and Jesus is saying this to them. He says to them, I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. It's an encouraging start to your life. But if you understand the context of where this is written to the church of Laodicea. And he's saying, I'm seeing how you're living, and you know what? You're not hot, you're no cold. It's just okay. And okay is not okay. But just above Laodicea was this town called Hierapolis. And Hierapolis was world famous because there was these magical hot springs that people would travel from all over the place to go and sit in these hot springs for healing. And it was just a short step to the north of Laodicea. And on the other side, just to the south, was this town of Colossae. And Colossae was at the base of these mountains, and up in the mountains in modern-day Turkey, they would get snowfall, and in the spring, that snow would melt and go into this river, and that river literally disappeared into a mountain, and right before Colossae, it came out of this cave, and outflowing was this water that was not just cold, but unbelievably cold and frigid and pure. Like there's nothing like having a cold glass of ice water. It's back in that day, there's nothing different than having just a non-muddy glass of water. And it's like that feeling after you've taken like an ice bath or something where you're just freezing, but then you get out and you feel phenomenal. So people would also travel to Colossae to have this ice, cold, pure water. And Jesus is saying to them, look, you are just lukewarm. Now keep in mind, this is written to the church of Laodicea. So this is written to a group of people that at some time in their life had heard about the teachings of this rabbi named Jesus. And so they began to gather as a group of believers, and they started this church in this town. And then they get this letter. It would be as if it was written to the Grove. And God writes us a letter that says, hey, Grove, guess what? Okay is not okay. Your life, you're wasting your time. You've become complacent. You've become comfortable. And there's no place for those words in faith. If you're going to follow me, then lukewarm is never okay. It says in James chapter 2, it says this. It says, what God is it, my brothers and sisters? What good is it? What God is it? Last time I said mooning instead of whatever, morning. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? What he's saying is, look, it's okay is not okay. Like there's never a place where your faith of just being okay is okay. Some close family friends of mine got engaged on Friday. And I was hiding behind the rocks with my families, and we were peeking, and apparently they heard us, but whatever. We're sitting there watching, waiting for them to get engaged. And I walked down, and I looked at the ring, and I said, yeah, it's just okay. It's medium. No, I would never say that. If you think about this idea of going to buy a ring for your spouse, your future bride, you go in and you're looking. Who goes into the store and says, you know what? I would like the most middle-of-the-road, basic $250 ring you got in here. We're settling for okay. It's not going to go well. The rest of your life is not going to be good. My daughter was getting ready to drive to Oregon, and I don't know much about cars. I can build you a house, but I know that there's stuff underneath the engine, and that makes it go. And so she had not, I'll be honest with you, she had not been treating it as she could have been treating it. And as she's getting ready to leave, she's constantly leaving grease stains and stuff. And I'm like, I just don't think this thing's okay. So 2 days before, she asked me, she's like, Dad, can you help me look at the fluids? And I'm sure. I said, sure. And I know the oil goes where it says oil, and the power steering goes where it says power steering. But I do know when you pour it in, it shouldn't instantly come out on the bottom. Out of every single area that you poured stuff into, and I'm watching, and I'm like, this is not okay. So I called a friend, or I called an auto mechanic shop, and I said, hey, can you please get my daughter in tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock? And they're like, we're booked for a week. And I said, I know the owner, he's a really good guy. And what's your name again? And they said, yeah, you can come in at 8. So they get there at 8 o'clock. The owner from the Grove, he calls me at 9 o'clock. He says, Paul, this car is not okay. He goes, I wouldn't let my daughter drive this car to Glendale. He goes, take it back. I wouldn't even let her drive to Tempe. It is not okay. You see, we continue to drive in the vehicle that's just okay. And we continue to settle for the just okay. But what happens is just okay is a slippery slope to completely broken. And in our faith, we live in this place too often where we're complacent, we're okay, we're just living in that. And I don't think that's, again, what God had in mind for us when he says, I have a vision for your life. And it's not just okay. The passage in Revelation, the letter continues. And he says this, he says, you say, so he's saying, I'm quoting you. You say I am rich, I have acquired wealth, I do not need a thing. But you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. I think I'd just walk away. I think I'd be done at that point if that's the letter I'm getting. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire so you can become rich, and white clothes to wear so you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put on your eyes so you can see it. By the way, I Googled it, S-A-L-V, it said salve, not salve. So salve to put on your eyes. As the church gathered in Laodicea to read this letter, now keep in mind, Laodicea was known as an unbelievably wealthy community. It was a community of what we would call self-made millionaires and entrepreneurs and visionaries. It was the center of banking. From a human perspective, they were the place to go. And then they get this letter. You see, one of the things they had in the city is there was literally a college that focused on eyes. And so they made this salve that people would come from all over the place if they had eye issues, and they would put it in their eyes for healing. If you wanted your eyes healed, you went to the College of Medicine in Laodicea. In John chapter 9, Jesus heals the blind man by touching him. But then at the end of the chapter, he looks at the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are the ones that are supposed to be in the religious know-how. They're supposed to be the leaders, and Jesus looks at them and says, you are spiritually blind. You are missing everything that is right in front of you, and it's the same imprint that this letter to this church has. You are the center of the world when it comes to healing the eyes, and yet you are all blind. The letter then says to clothe yourself in white cloths. The white cloths, when they would talk about that was character and grace. It was an image of I'm covering myself in character and grace, and I'm bringing it into my life so it's at my core. It's redefining who I am. Colossae was also known as a textile town. And they created this black, glossy wool cloth. And if you had money and clout and wealth, you would travel to this city to buy the wool from them so that people knew you were established. And yet he writes and says, your black cloth that you've been manufacturing, your glossy, shiny things that people are traveling around the world to come to get is worthless. You're covering yourself with the wrong things. And then he says to them, buy gold from me, which is an interesting statement. But it makes sense if you know who they are, the wealthy, the elite. If you travel with me to Malawi, Thailand, Liberia, anywhere around the world, every single person in this room is considered a multimillionaire the second you stand in their village or in their place. Because you have so much more than they can even ever imagine. So I can't say, well, that's not me because I don't have money. You're living in Chandler, Gilbert, Arizona. To those around the world, you are blessed. You have more than you can imagine. But what he's also saying here, buy gold from me. Well, there was a process when you bought gold. There was this refining period, this cleansing period. You had to take the liquid or the gold and you had to turn it into a liquid and remove all the impurities out of it. And it's the trials that you put it through that makes it more valuable. It says in 1 Peter, chapter 1, it says, so be truly glad. There is a wonderful joy ahead. Even though you must endure many trials for a little while, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. That your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. So people would take their gold and they would bring it to the goldsmith, and they would bring it into the smelting furnace, and they would smelt it. And so this furnace would just become just hot, and the gold that was solid would then just completely form into a liquid. The goldsmith would then stand over it, and he would sift out the impurities, and he would continue to do that, they say, until the goldsmith could look in the basin and see a perfect reflection of their face. So what Jesus is saying is, the gold that you're buying is not pure. You're searching and acquiring the wrong things. Now, I've never competed in the Olympics, but I dreamed about it my whole life. And I don't think there's anyone that when they are beginning their training, or any of the athletes, we watch them compete on the main stage, but we don't see all the stuff that goes on beforehand. And I can't imagine any of them are training going, man, I am training for bronze or fourth place. Fourth would be unbelievable. No, you're constantly saying, I'm going for gold. Like, I don't know if I have what it takes, but I'm going to train as if I could get the gold medal. And yet, okay seems to be okay. And fourth place seems to be good enough. And our faith just kind of moves. See, there's a difference between stepping into the vision that God has for my life, or continually chasing after my own visions. See, my own visions are fun. My own visions are just things that I want to do. My own vision is just my creation. And if my own vision goes south a little bit, I just start something else and I just leave it there. Years ago, we were living on the farm, and I've told you we've now moved our family down to the Live Love house. We're living in an apartment on that, and so there's not a lot of space. But when I lived on the farm, we had acres, and I would create all these things in the backyard. And one day I was looking around and I realized I have all kinds of lumber, I've got siding, I got roofing, I got reclaimed woods. And so I started to build this tiny house. And I said that I'm going to build a tiny house for my wife so she has a place to write and read. And there was a fireplace in there, and she would sit in there and write. And then when she got cancer, she would sit in there and heal by the fireplace. And when she'd sit in there and talk with girls and people, and she would counsel them. And it was this beautiful, magical place. And it was set up with this giant window so that when you went in there, all you could see is these trees. And it felt like you were in the middle of nowhere. It was a beautiful vision. So when the owner decided to sell the house that we were renting, the tiny house, I said, well, they can buy this too if they want. Well, then they marketed it as a child's playhouse. I don't know anybody that wants to buy a 8-foot by 12-foot by 16-foot high child's playhouse. And so they said, you got to remove it. And so this last week I went and I started to remove, because I'm not just going to give it to them. This thing's magical in my world. And I realized, because it was my vision, I just one day literally just started building it. I didn't realize that I may have to move it someday, so I didn't put wheels on it. I didn't put it on a trailer. I didn't check the minimum height to pull something down the road. I didn't realize that I was 5 feet above that. So now I'm like, well, what do I do? So this last week, every day after work, this is what I did. I went and I decided, you know what? I'm going to take the roof off myself. And I'm going to hopefully figure out a way to move it someplace. And in a year or so, I'm going to place it on the Oasis downtown in the middle of the community of Live Love. And it will then be made new, and it will be this new, healing, small, centered house of prayer where people can live or go into in downtown Chandler and just be still in that moment. So if you're clapping, here's what I'm saying next. Side note, I have to figure out how to move it by Tuesday. So if anybody has a trailer or a tow truck or a giant winch, something, if I can store it at your house for a year, that would be phenomenal. No, really, come talk to me afterwards. You see, my vision, it's great, it's good. But as soon as I'm done with it, I just move on. God's vision, when I step into that, and people are like, how do I know? You just know. Like, you just begin to step into the vision that he has for your life. In John chapter John chapter 15, verse 5, it says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. The church in Laodicea, they said, I got this. I can do this on my own. We're good. We've got wealth. We're self-made. It's like you're reading a book that was written to us in modern day Chandler, Phoenix, Arizona. I'm good. I don't need your help. Don't worry about it. The passage goes on in Revelation chapter 3. It goes on to say this. Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline, to be earnest and repent. Here I am. This is Jesus speaking. I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. Now, as a kid that grew up in church, I've heard that verse my entire life. I saw it in the 70s on the flannel graph thing with pure Jesus standing there and he's knocking on the door, and the next image they open the door and Jesus steps in, and now the rest of my life is perfect. And yet this passage was written to the church of Laodicea. So this passage was written to a group of people who already knew who Jesus was, who had already professed their faith in him, who were already gathering as a church. And yet Jesus is still standing at the door and knocking. We use that verse as a salvation verse. While all of it is true, yeah, you do need to ask him into your life. You want to find peace that's going to be confusing but awe-filled and unbelievable, you do need to ask him in. But that's not what this is saying. Jesus is saying, I'm standing at the door. Literally, just open the door. Like, just open the door. It's as simple as that. You know, we look at life sometimes and we think, well, I would have done that, but I could have really, I was going to do that, but then this happened. Or I know I should have, but it was just a little too scary, a little too confusing. And our life begins to be filled with wouldas, couldas, and shouldas. There was an author named Shel Silverstein. He wrote The Giving Tree and Where the Sidewalk Ends and a bunch of really bizarre poems. But one of the poems he wrote was called Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda. And it says this: all the woulda, coulda, shouldas laying in the sun, talking about the things they woulda, coulda, shoulda done. But those woulda, coulda, shouldas all ran away and hid from one little did. You see, how do you get past the place of living the life that is just okay? How do you enter into this world where you're not just going for mediocrity, but you are going for it? You are placing everything at Jesus' steps. You're opening the door and you're saying, okay, I want this life. I want this life that is not my vision, but is your vision. Then that means having this complete understanding where Jesus is leading you in this complete peace of not understanding how you're going to get there. I read a quote this week. It says, vision carries with it a sense of conviction. Anyone with vision will tell you this is not merely something that could be done. This is something that should be done. This is something that must happen. Think about visionary leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela. If they would have lived in the woulda, the couldas, and the shouldas, they stepped into this journey of being a visionary. If they wouldn't have stepped into it, life would be very different today. And it's the same thing with every single person in this room. We have the same calling in our lives to step into those one little dids. When Melinda, my wife, and I started going downtown with Live Love, it started because we felt the two of us were supposed to go down there, mainly her, and start just loving on people and just being with them. And after doing this for a couple years, we started looking what other nonprofits were doing, and we'd see at their yearly reports and see how they handed out 650,000 pairs of shoes and distributed 150,000 meals and did all these tangible statistics. And I started to doubt what we were doing, and we looked at each other and were like, what would we put in our report? Well, I ate a ton of tamales and carne asada. Like, we sat on the porch with a lot of people, Ruth and Rolando and Mario and Iran, like we hung out. We became friends. And there was a doubt because that one little didn't seem like it was the right thing that we were supposed to be doing. But 15 years later, I've now watched as that one little did continues to grow and to grow and to grow. And I have people coming up to me and saying, hey, last week with Live Love, I did this. And I'll look at them and I'm like, cool, I didn't even know that Live Love did that. And I started it. You see, the vision grows beyond you. On Tuesday, we got the final plans for the Oasis, which is our community center downtown that we're going to be building. And while it should have been a moment filled with joy, I sat down there with this 66-page giant book, and Melinda and I just turned the pages one at a time and looked at it. And on every single page, this weight became heavier, and this pit in my stomach became bigger, and this ulcer began to grow because I was thinking to myself, and then I finally said it out loud, the vision, like, it's too big now. And I was literally like, I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't know how we're going to pay for this. I don't know how we're going to start. I don't know what, and it was, I don't know what it could have, should have, all of them flooding in my body. And then I instantly stopped and I'm like, okay. Okay is not okay. Like, if God brought me to this place, then we're going to be okay. There is no too big when you step into God's vision for your life. There is no impossible. There is none of that. There is this continual growth of following him with this bold, fearless faith that oftentimes is scary. And we read scripture as if it's this soft little encouragement, when in reality, it's like a war cry of what you're called to do with your life. You look at it in Romans and some of the passages in there, and it says, don't just pretend that you love others, really love them. Hate what is wrong. Stand on the side of the good. Love each other with brotherly womanly affection, and take delight in honor each other. Never be lazy in your work, but serve the Lord enthusiastically. Be glad for all that God is planning for you. Be patient in trouble and prayerful always. And when God's children are in need, you be the one to help them out. And get into the habit of inviting guests home for dinner, or if they need, lodging for the night. Like, that's a war cry. Faith isn't supposed to be this simple, comfortable, easy journey in life. When you step into God's vision versus your vision, you are stepping into a tornado. You are stepping into a wave that is beyond your control, that the only thing you can literally do is hold on and say, God, I'm just trusting you. I just did a one little did, and now this. This is beyond me, God. I don't know how to step into this. And yet we settle for complacency. Okay is not okay, ever. Here's the thing with Monroe. When he came into our life, he was 1.5 years. He was scared out of his mind. My daughter called us, and we'd been saying to her, if you can't do this, call us. Like, we will be there, whether it's for a day, a month, a year, or a lifetime. And I remember my wife going up to get him and bringing him home. And I was so scared. And my mom called me on the phone, and my interpretation of what she said to me, she said, Paul, this boy needs you. This boy needs to know that he is loved. This boy needs a father figure in his life. This boy needs to know that he is made in the image of God. And Paul, you are the one that needs to do this. You need to step into it boldly, with courage. You need to trust that God is in this in spite of the fears and the garbage and the wreckage and the chaos and the pain. And she said, you have to do it. My instant response inside of my soul was, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to. Like I'm literally scared. But not only someday will someone tease him, but someday he's going to have to step into this world as a man. And I don't want him to ever settle for okay. And whether he is with my family for the next year or the next 40, I have to speak that truth into his life, because complacency is not okay. Being comfortable is not okay. God calls us to step into a vision that is so beyond us. Would you stand? And I think sometimes you just need to hear that spoken into your life, because all of us have struggles and doubts. So I'd ask you just to close your eyes. And these aren't my words, but these are God's words speaking into you. And I want you to know, God wants you to know that you are beautiful. God wants you to know that you have everything it takes to be a visionary. He wants you to know that you are beautiful, that you are made in his image, you are made in his love. You have the ability to reflect him. Your face looks just like his face. Your heart comes from his heart. You are loved, you are beautiful, and God is proud of you. I think oftentimes we feel that God isn't proud of us, but God is proud of you. He looks at you like I look at my child. He looks at you like you are his one and only beautiful created being. You are a child of love. And nothing can change the way that God feels about you. Nothing.